Hi everyone, in this video I would like to show you how to create this mesh in Houdini. As you can see on my screen, I've got this stylized smoke effect, and the main component of it is actually the mesh. So we're gonna create this setup in Houdini. It will be procedural, so we can control and have variations of this mesh using just a slider. So let's maybe hop into Houdini and I can walk you through what we'll be creating. So we're gonna start with basic sphere. We're gonna use copy to points to create this sort of mesh. We're gonna use VDBs as well, just to combine those together, soften it a little bit. Then we're gonna convert it into polygons and use poly reduce, so it's a little bit more game res version rather than over the top high poly version. We're gonna smooth the normals of it, create some UVs so we can actually create some erosion in the game engine. And as a last stage, I'm just scaling this up so it's suitable for the scale in the engine. Okay, so let's start maybe from scratch. So I'm gonna hide this setup, create a new one. I'm gonna start with geo node. I'm gonna call it smoke YouTube. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna dive into this node and I'm gonna start with a sphere. I'm gonna change this to polygon, and for now I'm just gonna change our view type to smooth wire traded so I can see the topology. And I'm gonna increase its frequency to 10, and this will be our sphere that we're gonna use to populate in the volume. If you see the sphere zoomed out, you can always press space and F and it's actually gonna frame it for you. I've got this grid disabled and I'm gonna keep it disabled for now, but you can feel free to have it enabled on your screen. Okay, so now let's create a volume that we're gonna populate the sphere across. Okay, so I'm gonna create another sphere. I'm gonna turn that into polygon, frequency 10 as well, and now I'm gonna create ISO offset. Okay, as you can see here, this is a volume now from this sphere, but I'm gonna actually increase the sampling to something like 30. Cool. And now I'm gonna use scatter. And that node's gonna create a lot of points in that volume. And I'm gonna maybe change the force the total count to something a bit more suitable, maybe like 10. And the next node I'm gonna use, it will be copy to points. In the first input, I'm gonna put our sphere that we've created in the beginning, and the second one will be those points. And now if you click on the node, you can see that we populated our sphere that we created in the beginning onto those points. So now if you go to scatter and change the global seed, you can see that we're getting a different variation of those sphere placement to those points. Okay, but now everything is very uniform. So let's maybe add a bit more randomization to it. So I'm gonna add here attribute randomized node. What it's gonna do right now is just gonna add some random color to our spheres. As you can see here, CD, that's color in Houdini, and I'm actually gonna get rid of it and I'm gonna add p-scale instead. And the default value is 0 to 1, as you can see here. I'd like to keep those balls something closer, so maybe 0.7, between 0.7 and 1. I want that kind of variation, and I think that's gonna be working really well in the engine later on. Okay, so I think something like this could already work. However, we still got some internal geometry because, as you can see, those spheres intersect with each other, and we got like very harsh line here on the intersection. So the next thing is I'm actually gonna turn that into VDB. So VDB from Polygons. And what it's gonna do, it's actually gonna combine those spheres into a volume of voxels. Okay, so this is very low res. I'm actually gonna change it to something like 0.3. And I'm gonna smooth it as well. So VDB smooth with the default settings for now. Next thing, I'm just gonna convert that. Convert VDB, and I'm gonna convert it back to polygons. And now this is a single mesh. As you can see, I'm not using any crazy settings, just the normal settings. As you can see here, this geometry is a bit more crazy than I would expect, so let's remesh it. I'm gonna use remesh next. And as an output, we get this geometry. So many times it could work, but I would like to have additional control. So what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna change the target size to 0.05. So the poly count of this, it's way too high to use in the game engine, I think. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to info tab just to double check. As you can see here, it's got 91,000 vertices and 30,000 polygons. So perfect node to reduce polygons in Houdini. It's called poly reduce here, and you can either operate on the percentages. What I would like to do, I like to just have like a raw output of polygon count. So I know exactly how many polygons I could get from this. So in this case, something between probably 1 and 2,000 might work. So let's try maybe 1,500. And I think something like this number might work, but you probably have to experiment on your end. Maybe you want a bit more spheres and different shapes. So feel free to experiment with a polygon count that might work for whatever you're trying to create. Okay, so now I'm actually gonna switch to smooth shaded because I already got the polygons and I got the shape that I like. And now I want to see how it looks in terms of normals. And as you can see, we're getting some weird normals shading on that geometry. So I'm gonna use Labs Soften Normals node. And I think default is 180, and this is what I want. If you can't see this node, you have to go to Side Effects Labs. If you don't see this tab, you can click on the plus and it should be here. Or you have to enable it through this shelves icon. Okay, so go to shelves, enable it. It should be here, and then you'll be able to see that shelf. If you can't see any of those, you have to just update the toolset. It's something that is included in Houdini, but you just have to update it basically to enable all those nodes from Side Effects Labs. Cool, so this is what we have. It's got 2000 polygons, which is exactly what we want. And now, ideally, we want to create some UVs. So I'm gonna switch the view from perspective, set view to UV viewport. And as you can see here, we don't have any UVs. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna create auto UV node. And what I'm trying to do here, because I'll be doing some stylized erosion in the engine, I'd like to have as little islands as possible. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna change this to cluster, and I'm gonna change the number of clusters to maybe 2 or 3. But now we don't know how much distortion we actually get. So let's try to add additional node. Labs calculate UV distortion. And it's gonna give us the colors for the distortion that we're getting on our UVs. So now I'm just gonna click once on this auto UV node and try to get a little bit different settings. Try to minimize those red values here. Okay, so I'm not having any luck with this, so I'm gonna increase the number of clusters. I think 4 will be too much, so I'm gonna try it, keep it to 3. I'm gonna play with the random seed here and maybe with the normal blur as well. Okay, so I think this is a good compromise. We're having 3 clusters and there is a little bit distortion, but not that much. It's not like we're gonna be displaying any texture on it, but just for the stylized erosion, we need this to be balanced. Now maybe I'm gonna reduce it to 2 clusters, and I think it's something that you have to experiment with. The less islands, the better, I think. So you might export this and you might notice that it's actually working pretty well when it comes to erosion in the engine. I'm gonna maybe keep it to 3, and if I'll have any issues with my erosion, some weird stuff's gonna be happening and it's gonna just look bad, I'm gonna come back and change the number to 2. Obviously it's number 1. For the 1 cluster it doesn't work. So I think 2 is a minimum, but try to keep it between 2 and 4. Okay, so we've got UVs, we've got the mesh, and we can just put this node somewhere here. We're gonna go back to the perspective view. I'm gonna go back to UV, and now I'm just gonna add a scale. So before you're exporting from Houdini, especially meshes, try to maybe increase it, uniform scale to, I think recommended by SideFX is 100. I like to keep it maybe between 50 and 100. But most of the time I export it with, I exporting my meshes with the value of 50 for uniform scale. And now space F to frame it again. Okay, I'm gonna turn on grid because I want to see how it fits on the grid, and if your mesh is actually offset, it's got some weird offset and it's not on the center, what you could do actually, you can use this align labs axis align, and what it's gonna do, you set everything to the center and it sits really nicely in the center of this grid. And also you can add some random offset if you want on the alignment position to align it better, but I usually just keep it all on the center and it sits really nicely. Okay, so now we can go back to the top where is our scatter node, and let's say you want a little bit more different node, different shape of this mesh. Okay, so first you can reduce the maybe the count of the points or increase it. But I think what you want to do, you want to maintain the shape of this stylized smoke mesh. So I like to maybe keep it somewhere between 7 and 10 or 12. I think this shape, for example, if you look at it from the side, it's too unique. So maybe try 8. Maybe 10. As you can see, it's a fairly rounded shape from all angles. So I think this is something that could work as an effect in the game engine. And now, for example, you want to create variation, you can change the global seed. Okay, and this could be random generator for you to create different meshes in case you would like to have a variation. The next thing is you can go back to your the main sphere for the volume, and for example you can change the values of the radius. I'm gonna change it to 3, and basically what it did, let me zoom in, it scaled this volume vertically, and now if you click on the scatter, you can see all those points will be scattered on this vertical sphere. So if you'd like your smoke to be have this sort of shape stretched vertically, you can basically do that. But now probably you have to go and increase the number of scatter points, maybe something like 20 or 15. So if you'd like to have like a pillar of the smoke, maybe you could consider something like this. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to reduce it up to 10, and I'm going to go back to the sphere that creates this volume, set it to 1, because right now I just want this sort of mesh. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed it. What we did, we just create a volume, we scatter some spheres into that volume, and we created a random scale for our spheres. We reduced the poly count to 2000 and created some UVs for it as well. And obviously, in the end, we just scaled it up. So it works in the engine and it works with the engine scale. So I'm even going to call it here game engine scale, just to make sure I know what this transform is for. All right, I hope you enjoyed this one. And I hope you're going to create some stylized smoke meshes on your own in Houdini, and maybe you'll be able to create some interesting erosion effect, or even texture it if you want. Alright, so another Houdini tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.